Hello and happiest folks for each of you today. Today we're taking a look at Pools of Darkness. It's the next novel in the series. That's the Pools series that's set in Phelan with the heroes of Phelan 2. The previous one, Pools of Radiance, which I knocked out too, which was by James and Board, and it was actually by a different person than Anee K. Brown, Jane Hooper Hall. Loved it lots. It's from '89, a year after the novelization, and then the video game that it novelizes. There's also a module version of this too, Roots of Avenger, that was published of the previous stuff too. I've all done recently reviews last week of those things, so you can check them out. All right, so this is set in the Forgotten Realms in the city of Phelan. It's a city that has just been restored after the first novel, and that sort of thing. Again, it's by James Ward and Anee K. Brown for you folks. Now, it's published in 1992, about 3 years after the first one. So if you're interested in checking that out, you can do that too. I'll link it in the comments below for you folks. Now, this is... So basically, the idea here is by swapping over authors. As a reminder, I have mentioned this earlier, but this world, the Forgotten Realms, was created by Ed Greenwood, and then he sold it for a nominal fee, not a big amount. He didn't make a lot of money, like a few thousand, and with the idea that he was going to be doing books and novels for it and such, because that was his passion. And so forth, and so his novel. So early on in this thing, the first one was Dark Walker on Douglas Nellis's Dark Walker on Moonshade and the Moonshade trilogy. I read that first. I liked it, but I don't go back and read it. I've never gone back and read it a second time. And then the next one was The Crystal Shard and the Dark Elf stuff by R.A. Stelter. Really put this on a major map. But Douglas Nellis was a pretty competent author too. And then strong stuff. And he. Put that on the map in a major way, and I do sometimes go back and read that stuff. I actually went back and read 10 of those novels recently for this channel a couple of years ago. Alrighty, so and then the other one that I go back to in addition is the Ed Greenwood one of Spellfire and Crown of Fire, since he was the guy who made it. I feel like he written the Spellfire, the first one to kick off the characters, and he was told, show us the realms. Right, you're the guy who created this stuff. Show us it. So he wrote a great novel, but it was cut down by like a third by the time it was published because it was overly long. So I've actually just recently gone back and read the expanded edition, and then also went back and read Crown of Fire too. So I knocked out those two, and then I went back and I was like, and then the other one that I go back to is Pools of Radiance, the Pools trilogy, the Pools of Radiance, Pools of Darkness today, and then Pool of Twilight, more far away, and that sort of a thing. And so I figured since I just done that, let's do that too. Alrighty, so this is set 10 years later, and that sort of a thing. We have two characters that have gotten married: Tarm, the priest of Tyr, and then the super strong. She was mostly an apprentice to start off, but then she became a strong wizard by the end. So this wizard and the cleric of Tyr, and Tyr is the cleric of justice and war. So it's kind of a two-sided coin. Alrighty, and so forth. And now they've gotten married and such. Now, in the first book, in the first chapter, we'll find out a lot about her. She gets the first chapter of the first book. And then basically what will happen is she will find out her master is a great person. And then he will get sent to Phelan on a mission to go help his good friend, who's got a wizard's tower there too, Denlor. And they will hand out and help out them to it's getting attacked by a bunch of monsters from Phelan, and then after that they'll both die in his tower, and he'll actually communicate with her with a crystal ball and give her some final instructions and that sort of thing. So she'll get a familiar, she'll get a staff of power, she'll get a thing of many pockets, like a belt of many pockets to store things in, and so forth. She'll get his horse familiar, bunches of stuff, and then she gets a ring of 3 wishes, and that sort of thing. And will set out for vengeance, and that sort of a thing. And then she arrives after a day of travel. And she's helping out her horse and that sort of thing. And she says, "Shoo, I wish I was stronger." And then the wish went into effect, and she now has like an 18 strength and that sort of thing. Super tall, super big. She was this little petite person and that sort of a thing. And then she says, "Wow, why would I have wished for that?" Because she looks at herself as a horror person now, because she definitely thought she was pretty attractive. Well, I should have at least wished for us to get there, which will, of course, teleport her there, and now she's the second one, and now she's teleported to Phelan, and that sort of a thing with her horse and everything else. And now she's starting. Now she's that's the end of the first chapter. Tarm is introduced in the second chapter, coming with a group of his people. He is initiated into a priesthood proper after being an acolyte after a few months, after doing properly the test of the sword, and that sort of thing. Successfully passes that. I like that. I think it's pretty fun and pretty clever, and shows why clerics used blunt weapons instead of natural weapons pretty smartly and such. And then he will actually come in, and then they are bringing the Hammer of Tyr to the brand new Temple of Tyr that was made in Phelan, in the ruins of Phelan, and in the sections that have been claimed over and that sort of thing. But they think that Valhalgan graveyard, huge graveyard, was it, so they start going in that way, and they're all killed except for him. And he actually escapes with the Hammer of Tyr. Without the Hammer of Tyr was captured by an evil vampire. And then in the third chapter, we're introduced to Ren of the Blade. He's a guy who's a ranger, very passionate about rangery things. Then he fell for a woman, and so forth. She was a thief, and so he left behind his ranger wife and became a thief instead, and that sort of thing. She'll die, and he's now a tavern. He's now a savior in Phelan proper, a tavern server. And that sort of a thing, and so find out a lot more about his characters and such, and his long loss of his life and that sort of a thing. And he's more older, more and such. All right, and so those are the three main characters. So again, this is set 10 years later. In the prelude, we're going to find out that Bane is upset. He's losing worshippers and power. So what he decides to do is he decides to abduct cities from the realms that have in pools of darkness, pools of radiance nearby, turn them into pools of darkness, and then suck out their souls and replace them with his servers and give more power to with them, and replace them with his servants, and then send them back. So that's his plan to increase his servants. We'll find out in the prelude. And that sort of thing, and then this is 10 years later, and then Phelan with a pool of radiance in the first book that's been corrupted to a pool of darkness, which does happen, and that sort of thing. And so it's now, and now we'll find out. And so you're going to be introduced to some other characters here, like Yvain, also on this cover. She's the lady in the far corner. She's a sorceress who cleanses pools of radiance. Her familiar Gamaliel. Now they'll have a party of people that they'll have, and they have to go and rescue Ashal and Tarl that are getting constantly sieged by the Wizard of Thay, who's a servant of Bane, who's taking them. He's the person who takes them, and so forth. And he actually has a pit fiend as his familiar, well, not as familiar, as his primary person. And he's also brought in a lot of folks too that are in that genre, fiends too, and that sort of a thing. And so he is the primary protagonist, and so he regularly attack Phelan with various attacks and try to siege it down, and then everybody else, the party. Ren was outside out in the wilderness because he re-embraced his rangerness and is no longer a thief, and that sort of a thing. And then basically what he's doing out there is he is living out there. He's just cleared out a bunch of valley for him to take over, and of orcs and such in the first chapter, and now he's going to come south after he gets dreams of what's happening, and the weather started to change foul, and that sort of thing. So he's going south, and we're going to find out what's happening with his dreams, and he seems that Shaul and his friends are in danger, but he hasn't seen them in like 3 years. So he's going to put together a party of Yvain, of a paladin of Tyr named Melchizedek, who's actually undead. I like him lots. He's my favorite character. My first favorite character in the first book was Shaul. She's my second favorite character. He's my favorite character. I love him lots. And then also a pair of druids are joined into. Alrighty, so that's fun stuff. Love it lots. And then that party will save them at the end. No spoilers, but obviously, it's a fantasy novel. Epic, great stuff. I do think it's a stronger shell story-wise than a previous one, but I don't like the ending as much. I think it's fine. I just don't think it was a great surprise, and it was a little bit longer of a harder read. When I went back to read Pool of Radiance, if you recall, and normally a book like this size, novel size, I like to knock out 30 pages an hour. That's 2 minutes a page. I like to knock it out. Sometimes in a slower novel, it's more 25 minutes an hour rather than 30. I'm 25 minutes an hour. 25 pages an hour. Sorry about that. But you get the idea. And then, all that great stuff out there. But this one, when I went back and read it, because of how strong it was, how good combat scenes were, how great Jane Cooper Hong was with it too, with James and Ward, actually knocked out 40 pages an hour. I was expecting for it to take at least, I was hoping it would take 12 hours, I was hoping to take 10 hours rather, and I wound up taking, but I planned for 12 hours, 2 hours a day. But it actually wound up being actually much stronger, faster stuff, because it was an 8-hour read. I started reading 2 hours and looked down. I was so into it, and I looked down like 80 pages had gone by in like 2 hours. I'm like, wow, I was blowing through it. And so I stayed that day and actually knocked out another 40 pages in another hour after everything was done that day. And did the same thing on Saturday, and then finished on Sunday going to church. Because they're about 2 hours in the car on church. It's a half hour there and a half an hour back. We typically go twice a day. And so I knocked that out too. Fast, blew through it too. And this one it wasn't as fast. It was more like 30 hours a page, 30 pages an hour, and such. So you get that all up and down the block. No, but lots. It's typical stuff, but it wasn't as fast. The combat scenes weren't as great, so the tale is epic, right? What it's trying to tell a stolen city, that everybody's trying to figure out where it is in the realms and so forth. You got a pit thing, you got a nasty red wizard of Thay, who's the primary bad guy. Bane has moved him there. Everybody's going to get sucked in the social darkness, right? The plot here is more epic than the previous one, but I just don't feel that the writing was as strong. It's not as fast either. Or their combat scenes and that sort of thing. So this is by Anee K. This was her first novel. She's typically an editor with TSR. I don't mind editors being given things to do, especially if there's somebody who's a little more experienced, right? I think editors can sometimes be just as great writers as writers. And a perfect example of that is the guy Sterling Lanier, who edited and found Dune and Frank Herbert and stuff like that. He actually was the first person to publish them. He got sent that novel to so many different places, but they said it was just so unconventional they didn't think people were going to like. He was the first person to accept that, and he edited him too, greatly, great stuff. But then he started writing, and his hero's journey, his first novel, is so strong, heavily influential on Dungeons & Dragons too. Strongly in the mid-70s, I love it so much. I've given it to a few friends, and they love it too. It's an absolute classic to my mind. In the 70s, it's just so 70s. It's got a mustachioed hero from the post-apocalyptic fantasy, who is a ranger, a cleric who's a psychic too, and that sort of a thing. Who has his best friend is a psychic bear, and he rides psychic moose. Up in Canada, he's a Native American guy too, and that sort of thing. It's a total 70s thing. He's just so awesome. Love him lots. That sort of thing. So that's Sterling Lanier. So you're not necessarily being one behind the queue, right? I don't think that writers write and editors edit, right? I definitely feel that you can definitely do both, right, with her. But I just don't feel it as much. So again, they're trying to do a better plot, but I don't think they deliver. So the previous one, if I recall, I gave it 7.5 to. So this I'm going to drop it half down to 7 out of 10. It's still fun. It's still interesting. It was still worth my time. I like going back to it. But it just doesn't have that sort of je ne sais quoi that Anne Cooper Hong brought to this instead of Anne Brown, the two Annes, and such. So that's the reason why I'm dropping it down already. So there you go. It's a 7 out of 10. For you folks, no spoilers, but have you read Pools of Darkness? And if so, what did you think? Remember, I'm not a trained editor, trained writer, or editor, or anything like that, right? I didn't go to school for English. Even I studied political science and then taught it at Eastern Michigan University and such. So I've actually not been trained in this. So your opinion is just going to be as valid as mine is, right? So just let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. And if you agree or disagree with this, I'd be happy to engage with it further. Also, as a reminder, like I mentioned earlier before, on Wednesdays I do video games, older video games. I just did Pool of Radiance. I should be doing when you guys publish this, starting the Baldur's Gate that it heavily influenced tomorrow. And then on Monday I do reviews of older modules and that sort of thing. I just did Cities of Adventure. I'll probably be doing B5. You probably should have seen B5 yesterday and that sort of a thing. So if you want to check this out on Mondays and that sort of thing, I did a lot of older things. I've done Keep on the Borderlands the last couple of weeks. I've did In Search of the Unknown. I've done recently The Lost City X1, 2, Castle Lambert. I did the Giant 7 series by Gary Gygax that put the Drow on the map in a major way. All that stuff. Alrighty, and so there you are. And then on Friday, I do top 10s of older things like videos and typically movies. I've done a whole lot of top 10 movies, also board games, top 10 comics and miniseries and comic writers, and then top 10 albums and artists too. And then on Saturday, dedicated to the forgotten storytelling genre, called the Serial Saturday that I call, for the folks. So that movie serials like Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon or Tarzan, so we've recently gone back and seen, or TV ones like Doctor Who from the first couple of seasons I've done reviews of too. So check that out if you like that too. And then on the other 3 days a week like today, I do reviews of older, in this case novels, short stories, novellas, or poems sometimes too, or even prose poems by Clark Ashton Smith. He typically has a bunch of those out there, and I've actually read a couple by Lovecraft too. Alright, so if you like those older things out there, and that's the passion of this channel too, where it comes from, and if that's your passion too, then please go ahead and welcome to the channel and have a seat. I think you'll enjoy it lots. Alrighty, so do all this YouTube stuff too. Hit the subscribe button, the like button, share with your friends. Just watch and just share. And then if you're feeling frisky, be notified to hit the bell icon and be notified of my videos. Alrighty, and there you are. And so as you can tell from all those older things each week, that's also the passion of this channel comes from. It's also where the name comes from too. The worst thing about new books. It's a quote by 19th century philosopher in France named Jacques Joubert, who said that the worst thing about them was that they kept us from reading the old ones. Not that they're bad, they're not. The new books are just as good as the older ones. But they're built on the shoulders of giants, right? And our passion for the new book, the new video game, the new novel, the new movie, right, and those sorts of things, we've sort of forgotten how great that these things are from that older era, and that they're standing on the shoulders of giants. So let's check out those giants. Also, my number one strength is context in the Strengths Quest personality type indicator. It's a positive psychological indicator, and that sort of thing you check out. So basically, I appreciate something more the more I know about it, and that sort of thing. Like, for example, in Gary Gygax's first edition of Dungeons and Dragons, he had an appendix N in the DM's guide that listed all the influences. So when I go back and check it out and read those things, I appreciate it more. Or Star Wars, I appreciate it more when I go watch Flash Gordon, that influenced it, right? Those sorts of things. Alrighty, so there you are. And if you just made it all the way to the end of this video, I just want to thank you so very, very much, for just taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my videos, because we all have so many things, right, that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me, that's incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it so very, very much. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.